The jacket Richard Montoya had been noticing something for 3 weeks, something he could not quite name. It was not a mistake in the kitchen, not a missed chore, not a complaint, not a late arrival. It was something in Lupe, something that was slowly leaving her. Like the flame of a candle when someone leaves the window open on a cold night. Slow, quiet, barely noticeable, until the flame is almost gone. The first thing he noticed were her hands. On a Monday morning, Richard watched her serve breakfast to his 3 kids and stopped in the kitchen doorway. Lupe's hands were red, cracked. The skin split at the knuckles, like she had held them in ice water for hours. She set down 3 plates with the same precision as always. Sliced banana for Sebastian, diced apple for Santiago, mango without the seed for Emily. But her hands trembled when she set down the spoon. Her fingers curled with the stiffness of something that hurts. Then came the eyes, the dark circles Lupe always had, the normal ones of a woman who started work at 6 in the morning, had changed into something different, deeper, darker, the color of a bruise that never heals. Her eyes had sunken into her face, like her skull was pulling them inward. And the clothes, the same clothes beneath her uniform every single day. A gray blouse and black sweatpants that fit her less each week. Because Lupe was disappearing inside them, like a tree losing its leaves in a season that is not autumn. Richard said nothing. Not because he did not care, but because he did not know what to say. How do you ask the woman who cleans your house if she is okay? With what words? With what right? He paid her a good salary, or so he believed. She arrived on time, she left on time. His kids were bathed and fed. The house was spotless. And that was all Richard needed to know. Or all he allowed himself to know. Then came the Thursday morning that changed everything. It was 11 a.m. Lupe was in the kitchen warming Emily's bottle. The triplets were 4 years old, and Emily still took warm milk before her nap because she was the youngest of the 3 by 11 minutes, and because Lupe knew that warm milk helped her sleep better. Even though no one ever asked her to know that, or to remember it, or to prepare the bottle at the exact temperature Emily preferred. Lupe stood at the stove stirring the milk with one hand, the other gripping the edge of the counter, because her legs had been trembling since morning, and the kitchen floor was moving beneath her like the house was on a ship. The bottle fell first, then her knees, then her entire body. The sound Lupe made hitting the kitchen floor was a dry, flat sound, with no protection. The sound of someone who goes down without putting their hands out, because the body has no strength left, not even to protect itself from the fall. The milk spread across the tile. The bottle rolled to the leg of the table, and Lupe lay on the floor with her eyes closed and her face the color of ash and her uniform soaked in white. Richard found her 40 seconds later. He had been coming from his home office with his phone in his hand and a folder of inventory reports tucked under his arm. When he walked into the kitchen and saw Lupe on the floor with the milk pooled around her like a white halo, he dropped everything. He knelt beside her, touched her forehead. Ice cold. Found her pulse at the wrist. It was there, weak, unsteady. The pulse of something that is still running, but running on empty. He called Dr. Elias, their family physician, and told him to come immediately. Then he lifted Lupe and carried her to the living room couch, and what he felt when he picked her up pressed something tight in his chest. She weighed nothing. She weighed like a 10-year-old child, not like a grown woman. Dr. Elias arrived in 20 minutes. He examined Lupe on the couch with a stethoscope and a blood pressure cuff, his fingers pressing the ribs that showed through her uniform like the keys of a piano. He took a blood sample, checked her cracked hands, lifted her eyelids with his thumb and shined a small light into her pupils. When he finished, he stood, gestured for Richard to step into the hallway, and spoke in a lowered voice that doctors use when delivering news they should not have to deliver. Severe malnutrition. Early-stage hypothermia. That woman is not eating, Richard, and based on the condition of her hands and her core temperature, I need to ask you something directly. Is that woman sleeping outside? Richard stared at him. That is impossible. I pay her full wages every 2 weeks. Dr. Elias did not respond. He packed his stethoscope into his bag, left instructions on the table, and walked out. And Richard stood alone in the hallway of his large home, looking toward the living room where Lupe slept on the couch, in her milk-stained uniform and the heavy jacket she never took off, draped over her shoulders. The same jacket she wore in the middle of May. The same jacket she wore when the Texas heat pressed down like a furnace. She wore it always, like she was hiding something, or like the jacket mattered more to her than the temperature. For the first time in 3 years of having that woman work in his home, Richard Montoya asked the question he should have asked on the very first day. How did the woman who raised his children actually live? Richard did not sleep well that night, or the next, or the one after. The doctor's question had moved into his head like a sound that would not stop. Is that woman sleeping outside? It could not be. He paid Lupe $1,200 every 2 weeks, a solid wage for a household worker in suburban Houston, enough for a room, groceries, and transportation. He knew this because he signed the payroll himself on the 1st and 15th of every month. The same document that listed her full name, Guadalupe Hernandez, and the amount that Caroline delivered to her in cash every pay period, because Lupe did not have a bank account. Caroline delivered it. That phrase crossed his mind on Friday evening as he ate dinner alone in the dining room. Because Caroline was out at a restaurant with friends, and the triplets were already asleep. Richard sat staring at his plate with his fork in the air, and the phrase rotating in his mind. Caroline delivered it. He signed the payroll. But Caroline handed over the money. He had never witnessed the transaction, never been present for it, never once asked Lupe whether she received what she was owed. Because why would he ask? His wife managed the house. His wife was who he trusted. On Saturday, Lupe arrived at 7 in the morning, as she did every Saturday. She made breakfast, bathed the triplets, left the kitchen spotless. And at noon, when her shift ended, she changed out of her uniform in the staff room, put on the gray blouse and black sweatpants, pulled on the jacket she never removed, and walked out the back door of the house with a plastic bag in her hand. Richard watched her leave from the upstairs office window. He waited 30 seconds. Then he grabbed his keys and followed her. Lupe walked 4 blocks along the neighborhood sidewalk to the main road. Richard followed in his SUV 3 cars back, feeling ridiculous and guilty at the same time. Ridiculous because he was a 40-year-old man tailing his housekeeper like a detective in a movie. Guilty because the fact that he needed to follow her just to know how she lived meant that in 3 years he had never bothered to ask. Lupe boarded a city bus at the corner stop. Richard followed in the SUV. The bus crossed the city toward the east side, past the shopping centers, past the highway overpass, past the neighborhoods Richard only recognized from storm coverage in the news, the kind of neighborhoods where streets flood and reporters stand in raincoats outside at night. The bus let her off on a cracked sidewalk in a neighborhood Richard had never had a reason to visit. He parked 2 blocks back and followed on foot, walking along a broken curb over puddles of standing water through a smell of drainage that stung his nose. Lupe walked without looking back. The plastic bag swung against her leg. The jacket was zipped to her chin, even though it was nearly 90 degrees, and the Houston sun hammered the asphalt. She walked 10 minutes, then 15, then 20, until the street ended at a concrete overpass crossing above a drainage canal. Not a real river. a concrete channel of dark water and trash and the concentrated smell of everything a city throws away and forgets. Lupe did not cross the overpass. She stopped at the edge, looked both ways, and climbed down the embankment to the space beneath the bridge. Richard stopped behind a concrete pillar 10 yards away, and what he saw from there changed the way he understood every morning of the past 3 years. Beneath the bridge, on a rectangle of flattened cardboard boxes that formed something trying to be a floor, were 3 children. The oldest, a girl of about 7, with her hair pulled back in a tight braid and a clean blouse that was a little too big for her. She was sitting on an overturned bucket, combing the hair of a younger boy, using a comb with 3 missing teeth. The boy looked maybe 5 or 6. He was sitting against the concrete wall of the bridge with an open notebook on his lap and a short, dull pencil in his hand, writing something with the concentration of a child doing the most important homework in the world. And in one corner, inside a cardboard box lined with newspaper pages, a baby slept. A baby covered with a jacket. Richard recognized it before he understood what it meant. It was the same jacket. The same jacket Lupe wore at the house every single day, the jacket everyone on the staff had quietly noticed and quietly dismissed as just a quirk. Lupe in that jacket of hers. Even in May, she does not take it off. The jacket that covered Lupe's shoulders while she cleaned floors and warmed bottles and bathed children all day was the same jacket that covered a sleeping baby at night inside a cardboard box beneath an overpass. The children saw Lupe and ran to her. The girl dropped the comb. The boy closed the notebook. They ran with the speed of children who have been waiting for hours and who cannot contain themselves when the person they have been waiting for finally appears. Lupe crouched and pulled both of them into her at the same time, a tight, hungry embrace. The hug of someone who has spent 12 hours away from the people she loves most, and who every single time she leaves them does not know if she will come back to find everything exactly as she left it. The girl pulled away first. She walked to a corner where a bucket of water and a plastic cup sat, and came back with the cup full. "Mom, we saved you tortillas from breakfast. They are in the blue bag." Lupe drank the water and ran her hand along the girl's braid. Then she opened the plastic bag she had brought from the house and took out a styrofoam container of food. Richard recognized it. It was the lunch Lupe prepared for herself every day in his kitchen. The plate she set on the counter at noon while the triplets napped. The plate Richard had seen on the counter hundreds of times without once wondering whether she actually ate it. She did not eat it. She saved it, brought it here. Lupe opened the container, took out a spoon, and began feeding the boy first, then the girl, 1 spoonful at a time, dividing the food with the precision of someone who knows exactly how much each child eats and how much needs to be left for the food to go around. And she did not eat. Not once did the spoon reach her own mouth. She broke the tortillas that the girl had saved. Cold, stiff tortillas that had spent the afternoon in a plastic bag under a bridge. She softened them in the broth from the container and gave one to each child. When the 2 older children finished, Lupe walked to the cardboard box, lifted the baby gently without waking him, and with a spoon fed him the remaining broth. Tiny spoonfuls, the kind you give a baby just beginning solid foods. Spoonfuls the baby received, half asleep, with his eyes closed and his mouth opening by reflex. Richard stood behind the pillar, with one hand on the concrete and his jaw so tight his teeth ached. What he was watching was not a scene of poverty. It was a system. An organized system of survival that ran with the precision of something repeated many times. The tortillas saved in the morning, the water in the bucket, the food divided in order. The baby fed last. A system Lupe had built to keep 3 children alive beneath a bridge while she worked 12 hours a day cleaning a house where everything they lacked was present in abundance. Then Richard looked at the details. The details that hurt more than the hunger and more than the cardboard. He looked at the children's clothes. Clean, not new, not beautiful, but clean. The girl's blouse had a hand-sewn patch at the elbow. The boy's pants were mended at the knee. The baby's outfit was faded and small, but clean and dry. Someone washed that clothing. Someone hung it to dry. Someone folded it. Someone was maintaining the dignity of 3 children living outside as though they lived in a house. He looked toward the corner by the bridge wall. There was a cloth bag with books inside. The spines were visible, worn, corners bent, but organized by size. There was an open pencil case with 3 short pencils and a small sharpener. A clear plastic sheet spread over the cardboard to protect it from moisture. A container with a lid where they probably kept the tortillas so the rats would not get them. Lupe fed her children with food she did not eat. She gave them her jacket to sleep under. She washed their clothes somewhere Richard could not imagine. She kept their books organized and their pencils ready and their schoolwork current. She lived beneath a bridge and maintained the structure of a home where there was no home. And she arrived every morning at 7 to a house in a gated community with her uniform ironed and her quiet smile and her hands cracked from washing clothes in cold water. And no one, not Richard, not Caroline, not the doctor, not anyone had ever wondered where she came from or where she went. Richard leaned against the pillar and closed his eyes. He felt something that had no name, but it felt like shame multiplied by 3 years of not asking, multiplied by every breakfast Lupe served while her children ate cold tortillas, multiplied by every night he slept on his $1,000 sheets while a baby slept in a box covered by his mother's jacket. He opened his eyes, wiped his face with his hand, and when he was about to step forward, the girl with the braids saw him. She saw him standing behind the pillar, in clothes that did not belong to this part of the city, and with a face that did not belong to this world. And her eyes, dark, steady, serious, in a way that did not match her 7 years, fixed on him, with the look of someone who recognizes a threat before it announces itself. The girl stood up, positioned herself in front of her brothers, and stared at Richard without blinking. Waiting. Fists at her sides, braid tight. The posture of a child who has learned that strangers who appear near your home, even when your home is under a bridge, never bring good news. Lupe saw him 3 seconds after her daughter. She was sitting on the cardboard with the baby in her arms, giving him the last of the broth, when she felt the shift in her daughter's body. The stiffness, the posture, the fists. She looked up toward where the girl was staring. When she saw Richard Montoya standing behind the overpass pillar in his dress shirt and leather shoes and the face of a man who has just seen something he cannot process, the color drained from her face like water going down a drain. She stood up from the cardboard with the baby still in her arms. The baby woke at the movement and made a soft sound, not crying, just a complaint. The complaint of a baby who was sleeping and now feels that something changed in his mother's body. The tension, the trembling, the heart beating so hard the baby could feel it against his ear. Sir Lupe said, and the word came out broken, split in the middle by fear, the total fear of someone who has just lost the only thing she had left, the secret that held everything together. Sir, please do not fire me. I know I should have told you. I know I should have said I have children, that I live, that we live. Her voice broke. The tears started falling, but she did not wipe them because she had the baby in one arm and the other hand she extended in front of her, palm open, as though she could stop with her bare hand what was about to happen. If you know that I live this way, you will think I am a bad mother, that I cannot care for your children if I cannot care for my own. And I need this job, sir. This job is all I have. If you take it away, we have nothing. Nothing. Richard did not respond, not because he did not want to, but because he could not. His jaw was locked, and his eyes were fixed on something in front of Lupe, something that had captured his attention before Lupe even started speaking, and that now occupied every corner of his awareness. The girl. She was standing between Richard and her siblings with her bare feet on the damp dirt and her arms slightly open at her sides, not like a 7-year-old child, like someone who has learned that when danger comes, the first thing you do is place yourself between the danger and what you want to protect. Behind her, the boy sat against the bridge wall, with the notebook pressed to his chest and his eyes very wide, watching Richard with the stillness of a child who has learned that when a stranger appears, the best thing to do is not move. And further back in the now empty cardboard box, the jacket lay crumpled on the newspaper, evidence of something Richard was still trying to process. The girl looked at him. She looked at him directly, eyes unblinking, not retreating, with a gaze that was not a child's gaze. It was the gaze of someone who had to grow up before their time because the circumstances gave them no other choice. And when she spoke, her voice came out steady, in a way that did not match her age or her size or the dirt on her feet or the bridge above her head. If you were going to yell at my mom, she said yell at me. Richard blinked. The sentence hit him with a force he did not expect, not because of the words themselves, but because of the way she said them, without hesitation, without trembling, with the absolute certainty of someone who has made a decision and will not change it no matter what happens next. She works all day for you, Sophia continued, without moving her feet from where they were planted. She leaves at 6 in the morning when it is still dark, and comes back at 7 at night when it is dark again. She leaves us her food. She leaves us her blanket. The girl pointed at the jacket in the box without turning around, because turning around would mean stopping watching Richard, and Sophia was not going to stop watching him. She does not sleep. I hear her at night. She lies down when we fall asleep and gets up before we wake. She lies on the cardboard with nothing covering her because everything she has she gives to us. Lupe took a step forward with the baby in her arms. Sophia, stop. Do not speak to the sir that way. No, Mom, Sophia said without turning. You always tell me to be quiet, that I should say nothing, that I should hold it in. But I am not going to be quiet. The girl looked at Richard again. The tears had started to fall from her eyes, but her voice did not tremble, as though the tears and the voice were two separate things that could operate at the same time, without one affecting the other. My mom is not bad, sir. The bad ones are the people who made us leave the other place. My mom paid her rent every month. She never owed anything. But 3 months ago she stopped having enough money, and the landlord put us out. Put us out, with all my brothers, with the baby and everything. And my mom looked for another place, but she could not afford it because her money got smaller, sir. Her money got smaller from 1 month to the next, and she does not know why. Richard felt something shift in his chest, a cold, heavy movement, like a stone sliding along the bottom of a river. What do you mean, her money got smaller? Sophia looked at him with wet but steady eyes. My mom earned $1,200 every 2 weeks. I know because she taught me to count the money. She says women always have to know what they are paid, so nobody tricks them. 3 months ago, she started getting $600. Half. From one day to the next. The cold in Richard's chest became something heavier. Something that was not cold, but the shadow of a suspicion he did not yet want to look at directly. Did your mom tell you why her pay was cut? My mom does not talk about things that make her cry in front of us, Sophia said. But I heard her on the phone with my aunt one night. She said the lady of the house told her that starting now she would pay her less. And when my mom asked why the lady said that if she complained she would fire her and tell the sir that she was a thief. Richard closed his eyes. He closed them with the force of someone who needs a moment of darkness to process something too bright and too terrible at the same time. The lady of the house. The lady was Caroline, his wife, the woman he slept beside every night and had breakfast with every morning and had been married to for 8 years. Caroline had cut Lupe's pay in half without telling him, had pocketed the difference, and when Lupe tried to speak up, threatened her with termination and an accusation of theft. And the result of that decision stood before him now. 3 children living under a bridge, a woman collapsing from hunger in his kitchen, a baby sleeping in a cardboard box covered by the jacket his mother did not remove during the day, because if he took it off, her son would have nothing to sleep under at night. Richard opened his eyes. He looked at Sophia, looked at the boy still pressed against the wall with the notebook against his chest, and he spoke to the boy with the soft voice of someone trying not to frighten someone who was already frightened. "Can I see your notebook?" The boy looked at Sophia. Sophia looked at him, and with a barely visible nod of her head, a silent permission between siblings who had their own language, the language of children who have learned to communicate without words, because words sometimes attract trouble. The boy stood up from the wall, walked 3 steps to where Richard stood, and extended the notebook with both hands. Richard opened it. On the first page, in the handwriting of a woman, the handwriting of a mother written in blue marker, were the words, "Study, my love. One day we are going to have a real home." And beneath it, in the handwriting of a child unsteady and uneven, the handwriting of a 5-year-old who has not yet mastered the curves of letters, written with the dull pencil, "I want to be a doctor so I can fix my mom." Richard closed the notebook. He closed it slowly with both hands and returned it to the boy. And when the boy took it and pressed it against his chest again, Richard turned toward the canal so no one would see his face. But Sophia saw it, and Lupe saw it, and what they saw was a 40-year-old man crying in silence beside a channel of dark water. His shoulders shaking, his hands pressed to his sides, his jaw trembling from something that was not cold, but the accumulation of everything he had seen in the past hour. The cardboard, the box, the jacket, the food divided carefully, the books organized, the clothes kept clean, the pencil worn to a stub, the 9 words in the notebook of a 5-year-old boy who wanted to be a doctor so he could save the woman who was destroying herself to keep him alive. Richard wiped his face with the sleeve of his shirt. He turned around, walked to where Lupe stood, and without saying a word, he removed his jacket. Not Lupe's jacket, his own. A wool blazer that cost more than Lupe's monthly pay. And he placed it over her shoulders with the gentleness of someone making the first right gesture after 3 years of absent ones. Lupe looked at him with red eyes and the baby in her arms and Richard's jacket over her shoulders and fear still in her face, but mixed now with something that resembled confusion. The confusion of someone who braced for a blow and received something else entirely. Richard crouched in front of the cardboard box and looked at it. He looked at the crinkled newspaper that served as a mattress. He looked at the impression the baby's body had left in the cardboard from sleeping there so many nights. Then he stood, walked back to Lupe, and extended his arms. Lupe, after a moment of hesitation, the hesitation of a woman who had spent 3 months trusting no one because the last time she trusted someone, they cut her pay in half, placed the baby in his arms. Richard held the baby against his chest with the awkwardness of a man who has 3 children of his own but has never held someone else's. And the baby settled against him with the ease of babies who do not distinguish between rich and poor, and who only distinguish between arms that hold and arms that do not. He looked at Sophia. The girl was still planted in the same spot with her fists at her sides and her braid tight and her eyes wet but dry at the same time. The posture of someone who does not yet know if what is happening is good or bad, and who will not lower her guard until she is certain. "Nobody is going to yell at your mom," Richard said, looking her in the eyes. "Never again. Nobody." Sophia did not respond, did not move. She held his gaze for one more second with those eyes that had seen too much for 7 years, and something in her face softened. Not a smile, not yet, but the first sign that the tension gripping her jaw was beginning to release. "Come on," Richard said. "Gather your things. You are all coming with me." Sophia looked at her mother. Lupe looked at Richard, and across Lupe's face passed something that was not yet gratitude, but something that comes before gratitude, something that resembled the relief of someone who has been holding their breath for months, and who finally lets the air go. Sophia moved first. She walked to the bridge wall, picked up the cloth bag with the books, the pencil case, the bag of clean clothes. She folded the plastic sheet that protected the cardboard, tucked the 3-toothed comb into her pocket, and picked up a plastic grocery bag from the ground that Richard had not noticed before. A crinkled bag tied with a knot that Sophia carried with both hands and pressed against her body with the care of someone carrying something more valuable than everything else. Richard did not ask what was in the bag. He walked toward the SUV with the baby on one arm and the book bag on the other. Behind him walked Lupe with the boy by the hand, and Sophia at the end closing the line, looking back once to make sure they had not left anything behind. Because children who have lived with nothing learn that nothing gets left behind. The drive back took 40 minutes. 40 minutes during which Richard drove the SUV along the same streets Lupe traveled twice a day on the city bus. The unpaved streets, then the potholed roads, then the main highway, then the tree-lined avenues of the west side, and with each mile the contrast grew more obscene. The sidewalks got better. The buildings got fresher. The trees multiplied. The world transformed into the world where Richard lived. A world 40 minutes and an entire universe away from where Lupe slept on cardboard. Lupe sat in the passenger seat with the sleeping baby in her arms and her eyes fixed on the road, not speaking, with the posture of someone who does not yet know if what is happening is real or if she is about to wake up under the bridge with newspaper stuck to her cheek and the sound of the drainage canal as an alarm clock. In the back seat, the boy had his face pressed to the window, watching the houses they passed, with eyes the size of dinner plates. Because a 5-year-old boy who sleeps under a bridge does not know that houses with yards and garages and white-painted fences exist. And discovering it all at once, while an SUV moves at 60 miles an hour, is like discovering that the world is bigger and more unfair than you imagined. And Sophia sat behind Richard in silence, with the grocery bag in her lap, and her hands over the bag, and her eyes straight ahead. Not seeing the houses, not seeing the yards, not seeing anything that her brother watched with wonder. Because Sophia was 7 years old, with the eyes of someone who stopped being surprised by the world the day a man knocked on the door of the room where they lived and told them they had 24 hours to leave. "How long have you been living there?" Richard asked, without taking his eyes off the road. Lupe did not answer. She pressed the baby tighter against her chest and looked out the window. And the silence she left was the silence of a woman who does not know how to say what she has to say, because saying it out loud makes it more real. 3 months, said Sophia from the back seat. 87 days. I count them. Richard adjusted the rearview mirror to see the girl. You count them. Every night before I sleep, I make a mark on the wall of the bridge with a rock, Sophia said with the naturalness of someone describing something they do every day, like brushing teeth or combing hair, except what she did every day was count the days she had been living on the street. My mom does not know. "I do it after she falls asleep," Sophia said, Lupe, in a low voice without turning. 87 marks, Mom. 87 days sleeping on cardboard. The silence that followed filled the entire SUV. Richard gripped the wheel tighter. Sophia kept talking, not because anyone asked her to, but because she had been quiet for 87 days, and the dam had broken and the water was coming out with the force of everything that had been held back. "Before we lived in a room in a neighborhood closer to downtown," she said. "It was small, but it had a door with a lock and a stove and a bathroom we shared with the neighbors. My mom paid $800 a month. We had enough, not extra, but enough. Mom would buy a whole chicken on Sundays, and it would last us until Wednesday." Richard listened. Listened to the accounting of a 7-year-old who knew exactly how much the room cost, how much the chicken cost, how many days the food lasted. Because in families where money runs short, children learn to count before they learn to read. 3 months ago, my mom came home on a Friday with less money, Sophia continued. She did not tell us why. But that week, there was no chicken on Sunday. And not the next Sunday either. And then the landlord came 3 times to collect, and my mom asked for more time, and he said no. And one night he came with a locksmith and put our things on the sidewalk. At night, Richard asked with his voice carefully controlled. It was around 10. My brother was already asleep. My mom carried him in one arm and held the clothes bag in the other. I grabbed the books and the boy's notebook and the bag with the papers. My mom had the baby on her back in a cloth carrier. Sophia paused. We walked a long time that night. My mom was looking for a place out of the rain. She found the bridge. There was cardboard underneath. Nobody was there. My mom put the baby on the cardboard, covered us with the jacket and a blanket we managed to bring, and sat beside us without lying down. She did not sleep that night. I did not either. I pretended to be asleep, but I watched her sitting there looking at the canal all night with the baby in her arms. Richard ran a red light. He did not see it. He saw nothing except the image Sophia was placing in his mind. A woman sitting on cardboard under a bridge at night, with a baby in her arms, staring at dark water, not sleeping, not crying, not complaining, simply sitting in the darkness, deciding that tomorrow she would get up and go to work in a house where everything her children lacked was present in excess. The first few nights it rained, Sophia said. The water came in from one side of the bridge. My mom moved us all to the other side and put the plastic sheet over the cardboard, but the water came in underneath. The baby got a bad cough the second week. My mom took him to the pharmacy and bought cough syrup with almost nothing she had left. I put wet cloths on his forehead the way my mom taught me. Emiliano turned from the window and looked at his sister. Sophia, do not tell about the rats. Yes, I am going to tell it, Sophia said. One night rats came, 2 big ones. They got under the cardboard looking for the tortillas. My mom scared them off with a stick. But my brother could not sleep that night, or the next, or the one after that. She paused. Now he sleeps with his shoes on because he says rats do not bite shoes. Richard looked in the mirror at the boy. The child had his head down and his hands gripping the notebook, and his feet, with shoes still on, inside the SUV pressed against the floor. They arrived at the gated community at 3:30 in the afternoon. Richard parked in the garage, got out, opened the passenger door for Lupe, and when they walked toward the entrance of the house, Lupe automatically turned toward the side door, the service entrance, the door she used to enter and exit every day for 3 years, the door that was not the front door, because the front door was not for her. This way, Richard said, standing at the front door with his hand on the handle. Today you come in this way. Lupe looked at him, looked at the door, and walked through with the baby in her arms and her eyes full of something that was not yet gratitude but confusion. The confusion of a woman who has used the service entrance for 3 years and does not know how to walk through the front door of a house she knows by heart but has never seen from this angle. What followed over the next 3 hours was something Richard watched from the edges with his stomach tight and his eyes open, because every detail revealed something he should have known and did not. Lupe bathed all 3 children in the guest bathroom, one by one, in hot water that the children touched as though it were something extraordinary. Emiliano put his hands under the stream and looked at his mother with an expression Richard would never forget. The expression of a 5-year-old discovering that water can come out warm. Sophia washed her own hair standing in the shower, with her eyes closed and her head back, and her hands working the shampoo with the efficiency of an adult, because Sophia had gone months without shampoo, and without hot water, and without a shower. But she had not forgotten how it was done, just as she had not forgotten anything her mother had taught her. And the baby cried when the water touched his back. Not from pain, from surprise. The surprise of a baby who only knew the cold water of a bucket and did not know another temperature existed. Lupe dressed them in clean clothes, the same mended and patched clothes, but clean, always clean. Richard sent the Saturday helper Maria to buy new clothes for all 3 children at the nearby store. Maria came back with bags full of things, and Sophia looked at the new clothes without touching them, hands at her sides, the expression of someone who does not know if they are allowed to take what is being offered, because nothing has ever been offered before. "It is for you," Richard said. Sophia looked at her mother. Lupe nodded with red eyes, and Sophia took the shirt with both hands and looked at it the way you look at things that matter, with attention, with care, with the seriousness of a girl who knows the cost of everything because she has watched her mother count coins in the dark under a bridge. The triplets came downstairs at 4 in the afternoon when they woke from their naps. Sebastian was the first to see the newcomers. He stopped on the last step, looked at the 3 children sitting at the kitchen table eating warm soup, and called up the stairs. "Santiago, Emily, come down. These are Lupe's kids. She always told us about them." And they came running and sat at the table with Lupe's children, and 6 kids ate together around a table with bowls of soup, and Richard leaned against the kitchen wall watching the scene with his jaw tight. Because his triplets knew Lupe had children, and he did not. His 4-year-old triplets knew more about the life of the woman who raised them than he did, the man who signed her paycheck every 2 weeks. At 8 that night, Lupe's children fell asleep in the guest room. Emiliano was out in 3 minutes, buried in the pillow with a depth only reached by children who have spent months sleeping on cardboard and who suddenly discover that mattresses exist. The baby fell asleep in Lupe's arms, in a bed, without a box, without newspaper, without the cold of concrete seeping through cardboard beneath him. But Lupe placed the jacket over him anyway, the old worn jacket that smelled like the big house by day and the bridge by night. She placed it over the baby, even though the room was warm and the blankets were enough, because the jacket was no longer just a jacket. It was a promise that his mother was near, the smell of what remained of a home when there is no home. Sophia was the last to go to sleep. She got into bed with the grocery bag next to her pillow. Lupe told her to leave it on the table. Sophia said no. Lupe did not push it. She knew her daughter. She knew that stubbornness was not stubbornness. It was the instinct of protection. The same stubbornness that made her stand in front of Richard with her fists closed to defend a mother who could not defend herself. At 10 o'clock, with the house silent and all 6 children asleep, Richard sat at his upstairs desk, opened his laptop, logged into the household accounting system. He searched for Lupe's payroll entry. The payroll said $1,200 every 2 weeks. That was what Richard authorized. That was what left his account. But when he opened the household expense file that Carolyn managed, the file covering groceries and the gardener and the dry cleaner and cash payments to staff, he found something that should not have been there. A line item. A bi-weekly cash withdrawal of $600, categorized as personal executive supplement. Over the past 3 months, Caroline had been paying herself $600 every 2 weeks, with money taken from Lupe. Richard did the math. 3 months, 6 pay periods, $600 each time, $3,600. Caroline had taken $3,600 from a woman who earned $1,200, a woman with 3 children, no husband, no family in the city, nothing except her job and the dignity of keeping her children clean and fed and in school on half the wages she was owed. And when the money stopped being enough for the room and Lupe was pushed to the street with her 3 children, Caroline continued sitting at the dinner table every night as though nothing had happened. Continued spending on restaurants and handbags and salon appointments. Continued living in a big house while the woman she robbed slept under a bridge with a baby in a cardboard box. Richard closed the laptop, turned off the lamp, and sat in the darkness of his office with his hands folded and his jaw tight, and the certainty that a woman who slept 10 feet away in the master bedroom was not the woman he believed he had married. At 2 a.m, he went downstairs for a glass of water. He came down in silence, no lights, moving from memory after 3 years in the same house. When he reached the kitchen, he found someone sitting on the counter stool, Sophia, with her legs dangling because they did not reach the floor, the grocery bag in her lap, her eyes open in the darkness, looking out the kitchen window at the backyard lit by exterior lights. With the expression of a child who cannot sleep because she has spent 3 months without a roof and now suddenly has a roof and walls and a bed and blankets, and her brain does not know how to process the difference. "Cannot sleep?" Richard asked, sitting on the stool beside her. Sophia shook her head. "Are you scared?" "No," Sophia said. "It is just that the bed is too soft, and I feel strange. Under the bridge I fell asleep fast because I was tired. Here I am not tired, and the bed is so soft I do not know how to get comfortable." Richard looked at her, looked at the grocery bag in her lap. "What do you have in there, Sophia?" Sophia gripped the bag, looked at him with narrowed eyes, measuring him, evaluating him with the gaze of someone who has learned not to trust and who needs a moment to decide whether this time is different. After a silence that lasted as long as a significant decision lasts, 3 seconds, 4, 5, she spoke. "My mom always tells me one thing," Sophia said. "The truth always needs proof, Sophia. If you do not have proof, your truth does not count." The girl looked at the bag. "My mom saves every receipt they give her when she gets paid, every single one, from the moment she started working here. She keeps them in a plastic bag and I keep them in mine. We take turns. My bag because my mom says important papers have to be kept by someone trustworthy." Richard felt the air in the kitchen grow heavier. "In here are all the receipts from the last 3 months, Sophia said, opening the bag slightly so Richard could see inside. Folded papers, handwritten pay stubs with Caroline's handwriting. Each one with the date and the amount and Lupe's signature. Every one says 600. But my mom taught me that before they were paying her 1,200, the lady of the house started giving her half, and when my mom asked, the lady said if she talked, she would fire her and tell you she was stealing. My mom does not steal, sir. My mom has never stolen anything. My mom does not even eat the food in this house. She brings it to us." Richard extended his hand. "Can I see them?" Sophia looked at him, gripped the bag a moment longer. Then, with the slowness of someone handing over something they have guarded for 87 nights under a bridge, she let go and passed the bag to him. Richard opened it, pulled out the receipts, spread them on the kitchen counter, one beside the other. 6 receipts. 6 pay periods, each one in Caroline's handwriting, each one for the same amount, 600, each one with the trembling signature of Lupe and the date and the note, bi-weekly payment, domestic service. 6 pieces of paper that told the complete story of what had happened. A wealthy woman stole from a poor woman half her wages for 3 months, and the poor woman said nothing, because the wealthy woman threatened her. And the result was 3 children sleeping on cardboard under a bridge, while a baby used an adult jacket as a blanket. Sophia Richards said with a quiet voice, his eyes on the receipts, "Tomorrow I am going to need to borrow these for a little while. I will give them back. I promise. You promise." Richard looked at her. He looked at the eyes of a 7-year-old who had guarded 6 receipts for 3 months under a bridge because her mother taught her that truth needs proof, who had slept with the plastic bag under her head like a pillow so no one could take it, who had carried that bag from the cardboard to the SUV and from the SUV to the bed, who was now sitting in a kitchen that cost more than everything her family had ever earned combined, offering the evidence that could change everything in exchange for one single thing, that it be returned to her. "I promise," Richard said. Sophia nodded, got down from the stool, walked to the kitchen doorway, and before leaving turned back and said something Richard heard like a verdict. "My mom does not need you to save her, sir. My mom saved us by herself. What my mom needs is for someone to see the truth, and the truth is in those papers." She walked down the hall in silence, bare feet on the cold tile, back straight the back of a girl who has just handed over the most valuable thing she owned. And she disappeared into the darkness of the guest room, where her mother and her brothers slept for the first time in 87 nights under a ceiling that was not concrete. Caroline came downstairs on Sunday at 9 in the morning in her silk robe, hair loosely pulled up, face unmade. The face of someone who expects to find an empty kitchen coffee ready and the newspaper on the counter. What she found was something else. 6 children sat around the kitchen table, the triplets on one side, Sebastian, Santiago, and Emily, and Lupe's children on the other. Sofia Emiliano and the baby in the high chair Richard had pulled from the storage closet because it was the one Emily no longer used and the one the baby needed now. Lupe stood at the stove serving scrambled eggs onto 6 plates with the same precision as always, the same care as always. Except this time, she was not serving 3 plates, but 6. And the 3 extra plates were for her own children, who for the first time in 87 days were eating hot scrambled eggs at a table with a tablecloth. Caroline stopped at the kitchen entrance. Her gaze moved across the scene with the speed of someone processing something that was not in her plans. The unfamiliar children, the new clothes, the high chair, the extra plates, Lupe serving food with an expression Caroline had never seen on her before. Not the usual timid, head-down expression, but something resembling calm. The minimal and fragile calm of a mother who can watch her children eat something warm. "What is this?" Caroline said. Her voice was not yet a shout, but it had the edge of something about to become one. "Good morning, Caroline," Richard said from the counter where he sat with his coffee and the newspaper closed, and his eyes fixed on his wife. "These are Lupe's children. They are going to stay here." The silence lasted 2 seconds. Then Caroline crossed the kitchen in 3 steps and planted herself in front of Richard with her eyes lit and her voice climbing with each word. "What are those children doing in my house? Who brought them here? Who authorized this?" Sebastian looked up from his plate. "Dad brought them. Mom, these are Lupe's kids. She always tells us about them. Sophia is the oldest, Emiliano is the one with the notebook, and the baby is Mateo." "Right, Lupe." Lupe did not answer. She stayed at the stove with the pan in her hand and her eyes fixed on the floor, because Caroline's presence in the kitchen had activated the same reflex that had been activating for 3 months every time she was near. The reflex to make herself small, to take up no space, to disappear. "Richard," Caroline said, lowering her voice to a tone it was worse than yelling, because it was the tone she used when she was calculating, measuring, choosing her words as tools. "I want to speak with you in the living room, now." Richard set his coffee on the counter, got up, walked to the living room. Caroline closed the door behind them. Before Richard could sit, she was already speaking with the speed of someone who needs to control the narrative before it escapes. "I do not know what that woman told you or what story she invented, but those children cannot stay here. This is our house, Ricardo. Our family's house. It is not a shelter. It is not a refuge for the housekeeper's children. If Lupe has personal problems, she should resolve them herself. We pay her to work, not to move her family in with us." "How much do we pay her, Caroline?" The question came with the calm of someone who already knows the answer and asks not to learn, but to observe the reaction of whoever has to answer. And the reaction was exactly what Richard expected. A blink. A single blink. Minimal, almost imperceptible, lasting 1/10 of a second, but containing everything. The surprise, the calculation, the recalibration of someone who has just understood that this conversation is not going where she planned. $1,200 every 2 weeks, Caroline said, not blinking again. What we have always paid her, and that is what you deliver to her. Obviously. The full $1,200. Every pay period. Where are you going with this, Richard? Richard looked at her. He looked at her with the gaze of a man who had spent the night reviewing numbers on a computer and found a column that said Personal Executive Supplement, and who now needed to hear the complete lie from his wife's mouth before destroying it with the truth. "Nowhere," Richard said. "I just want you to confirm that you pay her the full $1,200. "Yes, Richard, the full $1,200. Satisfied, Richard nodded, said nothing more on the subject. And that silence, that calculated silence of a man who has proof but chooses not to show it yet, was what shifted Caroline's tone. Because Caroline knew silences, and she knew that Richard's silences were more dangerous than his words. "I want those children gone today," Caroline said, switching strategy and returning to direct offense. "And I want Lupe to understand that her job is to clean this house, not to install her family here." "Lupe and her children are staying," Richard said. "If they stay, I leave. That is your decision." Caroline looked at him. The divorce threat was her strongest card. It always had been. In every disagreement, every conflict, the possibility of leaving was the weapon she pulled when she needed to win, because she knew Richard was afraid of the break, the scandal, the disruption of a separation. But this time, Richard's face did not change, did not tighten, did not hesitate, did not lower his eyes, and that destabilized her. "I am leaving, Richard. And I am taking the triplets. You are not taking anyone. They are my children. They are our children, and no judge is going to give you custody when they see what you did." The sentence landed in the living room like a coin dropped on a glass table. Caroline went still. Her face changed, shifted from strategy to fear in an instant, the fast, sharp fear of someone who hears something they did not expect and needs 3 seconds to calculate how much the other person knows and how much they are guessing. "I do not know what you are talking about," Caroline said, and for the first time her voice was not calculated or cold. It was defensive. The voice of someone building a wall with bricks they do not yet have. "I think you do," Richard said. Caroline set her jaw, shifted her weight, crossed her arms, and launched what she had left. If you push this, I am going to call my lawyer and tell him the housekeeper has been stealing from us. I can prove it. I can say things were missing from the house. That money came up short. That food kept disappearing. Who are they going to believe, Richard, your wife, or the help? The word help left Caroline's mouth with the same contempt with which, 3 months ago, she had told Lupe that if she complained she would be accused of theft. The same contempt that allowed her to cut Lupe's wages in half without losing sleep. The same contempt that allowed her to eat dinner in nice restaurants while the woman she stole from slept under a bridge with a baby in a cardboard box. They are going to believe the evidence Richard said, and the evidence exists, Caroline. Something broke in Caroline's face. Not a visible break. Something beneath the surface, like a crack in a wall you cannot see from outside, but that weakens the entire structure. She stood before Richard with her arms crossed and her jaw tight and her eyes moving fast from left to right, calculating, recalculating, searching for an exit that did not exist. "You are making a mistake," Caroline said, her voice reaching for threatening but landing somewhere thinner, more fragile. The voice of someone who knows they are losing and is trying to buy time. "This is going to cost you." She turned, walked out of the living room, went up the stairs. And from the second floor her voice came down with the clarity of someone who wants to be heard. "Lupe, pack your things and your children's things. You are leaving today. And if you do not leave tomorrow, my lawyer is filing a theft complaint." Richard walked out of the living room and into the kitchen. What he found pressed his chest like a fist. Lupe was on the floor of the staff room on her knees, packing her children's clothes into the cloth bag with shaking hands and tears falling onto her hands, and her movements fast and mechanical, like someone who has learned to pack in minutes. Because the last time someone told her to leave, she had 24 hours, and this time she did not want to wait even one. "I do not want to cause more trouble, sir," Lupe said without looking up, her voice broken, her hands pushing Emiliano's shirt into the bag, that shirt that still smelled like yesterday's shower. "You have already done more for us than anyone ever has. But I know the lady. She will follow through. She will file the complaint. And if they accuse me of stealing, I will not be able to work anywhere. And my children," Lupe, Richard said, kneeling in front of her. "Stop. Put down the bag. Nobody is going anywhere." "But the lady said—" "The lady is not going to decide anything in this house anymore." Lupe looked at him from the floor with red eyes and her hands gripping Emiliano's shirt, and the expression of a woman who wants to believe, but who has spent 3 months unable to believe in anything. Because every time she believed things would get better, they got worse. In the kitchen doorway, leaning against the frame, was Sophia, with the grocery bag pressed to her chest in both hands, watching her mother on the floor, watching Richard kneeling, watching the stairs where Caroline's voice had come from. And in her eyes, those 7-year-old eyes that had marked 87 scratches on a bridge wall, there was something that was not fear. It was decision. The decision of someone who has guarded something for 87 nights and knows that the moment to bring it out has arrived. Sophia gripped the bag, looked at her mother, looked at Richard, and walked toward the living room without anyone asking her to. Sophia entered the living room with bare feet on the marble floor and the grocery bag pressed to her chest with both hands. Caroline was coming down the stairs with a small suitcase and her phone at her ear, talking to someone, probably her lawyer, probably building the complaint she had promised Lupe, probably assembling the lie she was going to use to destroy a woman who had done nothing except work and stay quiet and survive. Richard was standing in the living room. He saw Sophia enter, saw the bag, and understood what was about to happen before it happened. Because the 2 in the morning conversation in the kitchen had taught him something about this girl. that Sophia did nothing without purpose, that every movement was calculated with the precision of someone who learned early that in the lives of people who have little, there is no margin for error. Caroline ended her call at the bottom of the stairs, looked at Sophia standing in the living room with the bag. "What is that child doing here? Lupe, take your daughter out of here!" "Excuse me, ma'am," Sophia said. The words came out of the girl's mouth with a clarity that stopped Caroline mid-sentence. It was not a shout, not a challenge. It was the voice of a 7-year-old who has rehearsed this moment 87 times in her head. Once for every mark on the bridge wall. Once for every night she held the bag against her chest, wondering if the day would ever come when she could open it in front of the right person. Sophia walked to the coffee table in the living room, placed the bag on the table, opened it, and began removing the receipts. She took them out one by one with both hands, with the same delicacy used for things that matter. Not fast, not all at once, but slowly, carefully, placing each piece of paper on the glass surface with the solemnity of someone presenting evidence before a judge. 6 receipts, 6 pay periods, 6 folded papers that had survived 3 months under a bridge, inside a plastic bag, inside the hands of a girl who protected them the way other children protect a favorite toy. "My mom does not lie," Sophia said with steady eyes fixed on Caroline. "My mom has never lied. My mom has never stolen anything. Here is the proof." Caroline looked at the receipts. Her face passed through 3 expressions in 2 seconds. Confusion, because she did not expect a 7-year-old to have documents. Recognition, because she saw her own handwriting on every receipt. The amount, the date, the signature of Lupe that she herself had made Lupe sign every 2 weeks when she handed her half of what she was owed. And panic, because she understood in that instant that what was on the table was the proof that should not exist. The proof she believed did not exist. Because who keeps receipts when they live under a bridge? Lupe kept them. Lupe saved every piece of paper given to her. Because a woman who grew up with nothing learns that papers are the only defense the poor have against the word of the rich. And she gave them to Sophia. Because Sophia was the most trustworthy person she knew. More trustworthy than any adult. More trustworthy than any bank. More trustworthy than any locked drawer. Because Sophia was 7 years old with the ferocity of an animal that protects what it is trusted to guard with its life. Caroline reached for the receipts. A quick, instinctive movement. The hand of someone trying to make evidence disappear before it is too late. But Richard was faster. He placed his hand over the papers before Caroline could touch them, gathered them from the table, took out his phone, photographed each one, all 6. One by one. The date visible, the amount visible, Caroline's handwriting visible, Lupe's signature visible. 6 photographs that uploaded to the cloud automatically and could no longer be erased, could no longer be torn up, could no longer be denied. $3,600, Richard said, putting his phone away, looking at Caroline with a calm that was more devastating than any shout. 6 pay periods, $600 taken each time. $3,600 stolen from a woman who earns $1,200, who has 3 children, no husband, no family in this city, nothing except this job. $3,600 you used for your dinners out and your handbags and your appointments, while she slept under a bridge with a baby in a cardboard box covered by a jacket because she had no blanket. Caroline did not respond. She had her hand still extended toward the table where the receipts no longer were, her mouth slightly open, her eyes moving between Richard and Sophia and the door and the stairs, looking for an exit that did not exist. Because exits close when truth has proof. And when she asked you why Richard continued, you threatened her. You told her that if she spoke up, you would fire her and tell me she was stealing. You shut her mouth with fear. You made her choose between going quiet and staying on the street or speaking up and losing her job. And she stayed quiet for 3 months, while her children slept on cardboard and ate cold tortillas, while she collapsed from hunger in my kitchen while preparing a bottle for our daughter. The living room was silent, the kind of silence that exists after truth fills every corner and leaves room for nothing else. Sophia remained standing beside the coffee table with her hands at her sides and her eyes fixed on Caroline. No hatred, no revenge. Just the expression of a girl who has just completed the only mission she had and who is now waiting to see what happens when truth finally has proof. Lupe appeared in the living room doorway, standing in the frame with the baby in her arms and the boy holding onto her leg, and her eyes red and her face wet, because she had heard everything from the kitchen. Every word from Sophia, every number from Richard, every silence from Caroline. And what was on her face was not shame or fear. It was something Lupe had not allowed herself to feel for 3 months, the feeling that someone was seeing her. Caroline looked at Lupe, looked at the woman she had stolen from, standing in the doorway with a baby in her arms and a little boy at her knee, and clothes that were always clean, and a dignity that was always intact. And what crossed Caroline's face was not remorse. It was the discomfort of someone who sees themselves reflected in the eyes of the person they have harmed and cannot hold the gaze. "My lawyer comes tomorrow," Richard said. "You are going to repay every dollar, and you are going to sign whatever needs to be signed. Tonight you are leaving." Caroline went up the stairs without responding. She packed 2 suitcases, called a car, and walked out of the house at 11 on a Sunday morning through the same front door she had walked in 8 years earlier. Except this time, no one walked her to the door. No one carried her bags, and no one said goodbye. The triplets did not understand why their mother left with suitcases. Richard told them that Mom needed some time away. Sebastian asked if Lupe and the children were staying. Richard said yes. And Sebastian grabbed Emiliano by the hand and pulled him toward the living room and said, "Come on, I will show you my cars." With the simplicity of a 4-year-old for whom things are straightforward, the people who stay are the people who matter. The 6 children gathered in the living room that afternoon. The triplets showed Emiliano the toys they had, and Emiliano looked at them with the same expression he had worn when he discovered warm water. The expression of someone discovering that things exist that other children take for granted. Sophia sat on the couch with Emily in her lap and read her a picture book with the patience of a girl who has spent years reading to her own siblings and who does not distinguish between brothers and borrowed brothers. And the baby crawled across the living room floor, chasing a ball that Santiago rolled to him again and again. And every time the baby caught it, Santiago clapped. And the baby laughed with that baby laugh that fills houses with something that furniture and curtains and marble floors cannot fill. Richard watched them from the living room doorway. 6 children. 3 who had everything and 3 who had nothing, playing together on the floor as though the difference did not exist, because for children, the difference does not exist. The difference is an invention of adults that children have not yet learned to see. That night, after all 6 were asleep, Richard went downstairs to the kitchen. Lupe was there, sitting on the stool where Sophia had sat the night before, hands folded on the counter, eyes looking out the garden window, the jacket folded in her lap. Because the baby was asleep in a bed and no longer needed the jacket. But Lupe kept it in her lap anyway, the way you keep things that no longer serve their purpose but mean too much to let go. Richard sat beside her, did not speak. Lupe did not speak, and the silence they shared was the first silence in 3 years that was not full of things one did not know and the other could not say. It was a clean silence. The silence of two people who are finally on the same side of the truth. 8 months later, on a quiet street in a working-class neighborhood on the east side of the city, the same kind of neighborhood where Lupe used to live before Caroline cut her wages and her world fell apart. There was a small house with a blue door and a window that looked onto a yard where a clothesline and a pot of herbs fit and nothing more. But for Lupe and her children, it was larger than any mansion because it was theirs. Richard paid the first 6 months of rent and covered the full renovation. Fresh paint, new plumbing, a gas stove, a water heater, so Emiliano would never again have to discover that warm water exists as a surprise. Lupe told him she could not accept it. Richard told her it was not a gift. It was a debt. The debt of a man who had signed payroll for 3 years without verifying that the money reached where it was supposed to go. Lupe accepted on the condition that when she got stable, she would pay the rent herself. Richard accepted, knowing Lupe would follow through, because Lupe followed through on everything she said. That was something he had learned too late and would not forget. Sophia enrolled at the same school as the triplets, and by the 2nd month, she was the top student in her class. The teacher told Richard at a parent meeting that Sophia had something she had not seen in 30 years of teaching, a discipline that did not come from pressure, but from conviction. The conviction of a girl who learned under a bridge that studying was the difference between the cardboard box and the house with the blue door. On Fridays, Sophia went to the big house with the triplets, and all 5 did homework together at the dining room table. And Sophia explained long division to Santiago with the patience of a teacher and the authority of someone who knows that knowledge is the one thing nobody can take from you. Emiliano had a full set of 24 colored pencils that Richard gave him on the first day of school. He kept them organized by temperature. The warm tones on one side, the cool tones on the other. With the same obsession for order he had when arranging his 3 dull pencils under the bridge, the old notebook was kept. Lupe did not throw it away. She placed it on the shelf in the living room beside a photograph of the 3 children. Open to the first page, where her writing in blue marker still read, "Study, my love. One day we are going to have a real home." And beneath it, in Emiliano's handwriting, which was no longer unsteady but firm because a child who writes every day at a real desk improves just as a muscle that is exercised grows stronger, it now read, "We already have a real home, Mom." The baby slept in a wooden crib that Richard bought from a furniture store near the old neighborhood. He had clean sheets, a small pillow, and a starmobile that Emiliano made from cardstock and yarn. But every night, without exception, Lupe placed the jacket over him. The same old worn jacket that no longer needed to cover anyone because now there were blankets and a roof and walls. Lupe placed it anyway. Sometimes she would stay a moment with her hand resting on the jacket watching the baby sleep. And if anyone had asked her why she still put it there, she would have said, out of habit. But it was not habit. It was memory. The memory of 87 nights when that jacket was the only thing between her son and the cold. And the act of placing it. Gentle, slow, both hands smoothing the fabric over the baby's body, was the way Lupe reminded herself where they had come from, so she would never forget what it cost to get here. Richard came every week with the triplets. The 6 children played in the yard of the blue house with the same naturalness as they had played that first day in the mansion, without measuring, without calculating who had more and who had less. Because children are not born with that calculator. They only acquire it when adults install it in them. Sebastian taught Emiliano to ride a bike on the neighborhood sidewalk. Emily and Sophia invented a secret language only they understood. Santiago made faces at the baby until the baby laughed, with a laugh that filled the whole yard. And Lupe continued working at the big house. Not because she had no other choice, but because she wanted to. She arrived at 7, left at 4. Richard adjusted her schedule so she could pick up her children from school, and the triplets greeted her every morning with the same joy as always, because for them, Lupe was not the housekeeper. She was the person who cared for them, who cut their fruit the way each one liked it, who knew that Emily needed warm milk, and that Santiago was afraid of bees, and that Sebastian would not eat anything green unless Lupe cut it so small it could not be seen. Lupe knew everything about those children. She always had. The difference was that now someone else knew it too. In the upstairs office of the big house, in the drawer where Richard used to keep grocery invoices and vendor contracts, there was now an object that did not belong to any accounting category. A small cardboard box, flattened, corners bent, a water stain on one side. The newspaper inside still crinkled and stuck to the bottom. The box where the baby slept 87 nights under the bridge above the drainage canal. Richard had retrieved it from the bridge the day he went back for the remaining belongings. He cleaned it, kept it, and taped to the inside lid a photograph that Lupe sent him one Sunday from her phone. The 6 children sitting in the yard of the blue house, with their legs hanging off the low garden wall and their arms around each other's shoulders. Sophia on one end with her serious face, and the baby on the other end in Sebastian's lap. And the 4 in the middle, smiling the smile of children who do not know they are being photographed, and who, because of that smile, for real. Beneath the photograph, in Richard's own handwriting, he had written, "So I never forget what I failed to see."